Oh, I didn't know if that was my phone doing that. Because I don't know where I left it. Anyways, I would like to remind the parents that tomorrow you meet down at the biological station at 9 o'clock. The van will leave at 9, so check in about 8:45 for the children's field trip. And with that said, this Wednesday we will have Dr. Beth Leuck, and she is going to share something about natural history with us.
Let me ask you, am I talking loud enough for everyone to hear me? Cars included? Should I use that? No? All right. I'm not, is it coming on? I heard Laurie, I don't hear me. Okay, all right. I'm going to try to use this at the same time. I'm here I said I was given the topic of natural history to talk about. And I think it's been quite a while since we've had anyone talk about the snakes here on Beaver Island, so I decided to do the snake species that are here on Beaver Island, talk a little bit about them. I want to start first, though, by just saying a little bit about snakes in general. Now, I know I've got a bunch of really enthusiastic people right here in the front row that love snakes. I'm going to guess from the looks and some other faces out there, you may not feel as positive about snakes as everybody in the front row here does. But let's do a little bit about them. They are unusual animals. They, of course, have no legs. And they can move very fast. They don't move like a normal animal does, it seems. And that seems to be what scares people the most. There's been a lot of good research done to indicate that humans aren't the only animals that are afraid of snakes. It turns out a lot of other primates, monkeys and apes, are too. They react to snakes kind of like we do. So we have this innate fear of snakes. But the more you learn about snakes, the less scary they become. So to go over a few things, they are missing any limbs. They do not have any forelimbs or hind limbs. They have a very long, flexible backbone that lets them slither. And their scales then can grab hold of the surface underneath them to let them move. And this is just not something we're comfortable with. Another thing snakes do that seem to bother people is they don't have any eyelids. So they can't blink at you. So when a snake looks at you, it's just staring at you. And that sometimes scares people. People don't like that. So there are all these weird things about snakes that bother you. If you don't have any hands and you don't have any legs, how do you get your food? The snakes have to use their mouths. The only thing they can really use is to coil up food, baby, and then use their mouths to swallow it. They don't have teeth that allow them to chew. They do have teeth. They have teeth that allow them to grab things, but they can't chew with those teeth. So instead, they're going to have to grab with those teeth, which face backwards, so that if something tries to get out of their mouth, it's going to get stuck on the teeth. And then they have to work that food down their mouth. We don't eat that way. That's weird. We don't like it. It doesn't look right. But they eat their food whole. That's the only way they can do it. So they have all these characteristics that make them scary to people. People don't like them. They just don't like them. And you, if you are someone who doesn't like them, just need to learn a little more about them, and then you wouldn't find them quite as scary. They wouldn't be bad. Now, first of all, how many venomous snakes do we have on the island? Any of you guys in front here know? I'm seeing what you're pointing, and you are right. None. We have no venomous snakes on this island. I'm going to repeat that because it's important. There are no venomous snakes on this island. There are no rattlesnakes. I don't care if you think you saw one or not, you didn't. Because there are some snakes that rattle their tail in the leaves and they make it sound like a rattlesnake, but they're not rattlesnakes. So even if you get bit by 4 snakes out here at once here, you don't need to go anywhere to be treated because they're not venomous. They aren't going to hurt you. The only thing that's going to hurt is where they bit you. That's it. You're not going to get sick or anything like that. So that's the first thing I want to point out. No venomous snakes. We have traditionally 7 different kinds or species of snakes here on the island. We're going to add an 8th one today for you. So I would have to say thanks to several people there toward the back row. We are absolutely sure that we have an 8th species on the island. We pretty well knew it before, didn't we? And I'm going to cover then these 7 and 8, and then the 8th species too, during this talk. I have 4 of the species in my cooler over here. So when I talk about them, I'll pull them out and you can take a look at them. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to cover some of the smaller snakes first. So we have 3 species that I would consider fairly small. And the first one of these is one that is called a smooth green snake. And they are beautiful. You've seen one? Yeah, they are really nice snakes. I don't have one with me, but for those of you that are going out tomorrow to Miller's Marsh, I'm going to bet you'll find some. You're going to get a couple if you go out there. So look for those tomorrow. Green snakes can get about this long as adults. They are a beautiful bright green. They are totally harmless. Any of you guys know what they eat? That green snakes like insects. They particularly like to eat crickets and grasshoppers and insects that they can just eat out of the grass. So where are you going to find green snakes if they're eating insects that you find in grass? In the grass. They're going to be mostly in fields. If you're going out tomorrow on the CMU trip, then you're going to Miller's Marsh, and there's a big field, several big fields there, and that's why you're likely to find green snakes there. They are totally harmless. Like I said, all snakes are on the island. They lay eggs. So they actually lay eggs. They have kind of round eggs. And usually those eggs are laid, about this time of year or so. So you might even find some green snake eggs under the boards out when you go, for those of you that are going tomorrow. I know a lot of you are, which is why I mentioned that. Remember what else I was going to say about them. They rarely bite. So when you do pick them up, you don't usually get bit by them. Some snakes, even if they're not venomous, like to bite. But green snakes don't bite. So that means a lot of people like to handle them. For people that are afraid of snakes, that's usually the snake I prefer giving them to be the first one they handle. Because almost anybody will hold a green snake. They're very pretty, and they're not scary because they don't bite you at all. So they're very, very gentle snakes. But here's one thing about green snakes, and this holds for all snakes, but particularly green snakes. They do not do well in captivity. So you should never, ever take a green snake home and try to keep it. Don't ever do that. I don't recommend doing that with any of the snakes here on our island, but particularly green snakes. Even people that know snakes really, really well have a hard time keeping green snakes alive. So don't take them home. Just enjoy them in the field and then let them go where you found them. Okay? I'll just check with any questions that anyone's got to ask about green snakes. Yes? That's exactly what you should do. You should go back right where you are. Another thing about snakes that are a good thing not to do, and you didn't do it, which is good, and that is take them somewhere else and release them. Because then they don't know their habitat. They don't know where they are. It'd be like if any of you guys have never been to New York City, it would be like I transported you to New York City and dumped you down in the middle of New York City. You wouldn't have any idea where you were. The snake doesn't know either, and it goes somewhere else. So it's always a good idea that we let it go exactly where you found it. Okay? So we'll go on to the next small snake that I want to mention, and this is called a ringneck snake. Ringneck snakes are called that because surprisingly they have a little ring right around their back here. They're usually blackish, they're very shiny, blackish or blue-black, sometimes a little bit brown. Their ring and the undersides of their belly will be yellow or orange. They only get to be about that long, so they're fairly small snakes. They're found mostly in the woods. They're pretty secretive. They're hard to find because you find them mostly in the woods. They like moist areas. The main reason they like moist areas is because their favorite food here on Beaver Island are salamanders. And the only thing that you find here or the only place you find salamanders here on the island are in woods or in water, right? So you don't find them, the ringneck snake, too much around water, but they'll definitely be in areas where it's very, very moist. And And they are also very gentle snakes. They rarely bite. If they're going to eat salamanders, they have no interest in eating you, so they're not going to be a problem. And I do have a ringneck snake with me, so you'll have to give me a second here. I got to get out of my cooler over here, maybe get the right bag. But I will do that then, so just give me 1 second. Pillowcases make good things to keep snakes.
Snakes in the pillowcase?
Yeah? And you tie a tight knot, especially with little snakes.
You take pictures.
Right, no, that's not a baby. That's actually a really good sized dog. Hunter, can I get you to come hold the bag for me there, please, for a second? That was pass. I'll trade. Okay, so now you see it's not biting me or anything. But see the ring? See the ring there? Yeah. Not right now, okay, because I got a lot of people I've got to show it to. All right, so we'll do that later. See the ring? Anybody else need to see a ring snake back here? It's like that. Yeah, now that's not a big one at all, but it's still probably a young adult. You can see the orange underneath it on the belly.
How big do they get?
They will get about like that.
Just stay still for 1
Well,
second.
it won't. You might have trouble getting it to hold still.
That's tiny. I've never seen that. It's easy to miss it.
This one's about half the size of what it could normally get.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's about half the size. They can get about double that size. Now, it's not really happy about being held. You wouldn't either if you were a snake. So right here is, we call that its vent, and that's where it releases its pee and poop. And a lot of snakes, when they're disturbed, will also release a liquid that's very musky smell. It's called musk. And he's done that. So now my fingers smell. So, but that's pretty common, but he doesn't bite at all. They're very, very nice little snakes. Okay, I'm going to put him back. We'll see about getting, some of these other snakes off and people come touch and stuff like that. So, like I said, they get about that big. Now, the next small snake, yeah. Well, wait till we get there. Wait till we get there. Yeah.
Do the different snakes, like you're going to pick up another snake and you have musk on your hand, is the other species of snake not going to like that, or is that all?
They don't seem to respond in any way. That's different than something like a pheromone, which would be a chemical that would attract a snake of the same species. This is mostly a defensive mechanism, and so it's kind of like everybody's doing it,
Yeah.
But they are species specific. They will vary.
Does that repel other
It's supposed
creatures
to
from
repel a predator or something. That's right. You gotta remember, when I stick my hand in that bag like that, that's a predator to that snake. I mean, imagine you're sitting there in a bag, which you're probably not happy about to give it. All of a sudden, this giant hand comes in and reaches out and yanks you out of the bag. That would scare you too. So this is how snakes are going to react that way. We're scaring them. That's why I don't like handling them a lot or picking them up. I like to leave them in place as much as possible. I think it was important to show people snakes today. So I talked to them. They said it was okay. We did it. The next small snake we have here on the island is one that is called a red-bellied snake. And gets to be about as big as that ringneck snake does. Yeah. Yeah. And you will probably find them. Yeah, they're tiny. They're little guys. They can still get about that big. But you'll probably, again, if you're going on a trip tomorrow, there's a very good chance you'll catch some red-bellied snakes too. They're called red-bellied snakes because usually they have a red belly, although not always. The one I've got, I do have one here in a minute, has got a pink belly rather than a red one. But they are small, kind of gray-brown snakes with very indistinct stripes on their backs and usually a red or pink belly. And they're interesting. Again, they're gentle. They don't usually bite, but they have this funny thing where they curl their lips up at you when you catch because they probably actually have a very weak venom. Venom is really nothing more than poisonous saliva, spit. It's poisonous spit, kind of. It comes from the venom sacs are the same as our salivary glands are, for example. So all it's doing is it has probably a little bit of stuff in it that helps it dissolve its food, and they think that it might help keep smaller predators away from them. To us humans, it doesn't matter. You know, they curl up their lips and smear it. Well, that doesn't do anything to us, so we don't care. But they are mostly slug and earthworm eaters. So they eat slugs and they eat earthworms. So they're found then in usually, again, moist woodlands. You find them in moist areas where slugs and earthworms would be occurring. They're very secretive, just the way the ringnecks are. And the interesting thing about them, they are the only small snake we have that gives birth to live young. So the green snake, and I didn't mention it for the ringneck, lay eggs, just like you'd expect snakes to do. But the red-bellies will give birth to live young, and they aren't the only snakes here on the island to do that. What they do is they hold their eggs inside them for a long period of time. And then the eggs hatch out, but what you see come out of the female will be young. The eggs hatch literally inside the female's body. So you just see the live ones come out. So I'll pull out my little red belly here. So see, it's a little tiny snake again. That's not a very big one. They get bigger than this. And this one has a pink belly under the red. See, what's he doing? It peed. Why? It's frightened, exactly. It's scared. You'd be scared too if somebody was doing this to you when you were this size. So that's pretty common, but it doesn't bite. See, it doesn't bite. Like I said, these are slug and earthworms. They have a really indistinct brown stripes down their back, longitudinal brown stripes down their back. You can see a little bit. Yeah, see, it's kind of pink. Turn that way. It's not very dark at all. Okay, after we get done talking about all the snakes, we'll have them available over here. Okay, so I don't want to pass them around too much because we're already scaring them, but you're welcome to come look at them a little better. Okay, so those are what I call our three small species here on the island. Now we go to the bigger species. And the first of the bigger species I'm going to mention is one that I bet everybody in this area, I was going to say room, not in the room, knows about, and that's garter snakes. The eastern garter snake. They are probably, could be, the most common snake on the island. They are, and if I don't have you going to see this one, two garter snakes. They are found everywhere, fields, woods, sometimes near water. You can find them out on the beach sometimes. And so you'd be really, if you're looking at snakes at all, you'd be hard-pressed not to see garter snakes. The only bad thing I find about them is they love to bask in the middle of the roads. So unfortunately, when you see snakes run over in the road, it's usually a garter snake that's been run over. And that's just too bad. I'm a little sympathetic because sometimes it's just hard to see those snakes. I'm less sympathetic if you could deliberately run over them. But if you're here listening about snakes, you're not the kind of people that do that. But so I don't like to see things deliberately run over. The garter snakes can get pretty darn big. About like that for a big female. The females are larger than the males. So the females can get very large. They are very variable in their coloration. Yeah, pull it out. So this is not a very big one. They have three stripes on them, which are really hard to see. You can see one of the side stripes right there, and another stripe there. On this one, the back stripe is not hardly visible. There's one that runs down its backbone like that. They also can get kind of a checkered pattern on the side. They are possibly one of the most variable snakes in color and pattern that we have here on the island. Very, very variable. These stripes can be almost white, They can go all the way to orange. There's some that are just beautiful orange snakes. They have orange stripes, orange kind of checkered patterns on them. So they're absolutely beautiful. Normally I have just plain white belly, as you can see. It's not very exciting. They have red tongues tipped with black. So as you can see, as he puts his tongue out and senses the air, then that means that's a red tongue. Now you can do it. There you go. Okay.
He senses the frog.
It possibly could be, but about like if I were holding you like this right now, you probably wouldn't be too interested in eating ice cream, which is somebody's grabbing you in their hand. So he's probably not too interested in the frogs right now. But that brings us up to what they eat. These guys are very eclectic in their eating habits. They will eat just about anything they can wrap their mouths around. They do eat frogs. They will eat tadpoles. They will eat toads. They will eat baby birds. They will eat mice. They will eat crayfish. They will eat fish. Anybody want to add anything else that you've seen a garter snake eat? I'm looking at these guys back there. Do they go in the water? Not really. I mean, they will possibly, but they don't spend time. I will get to that. Thank you for asking. I might have forgotten. I'll get to that. But remind me, I want to mention one more thing that they tend to eat the most of here on Beaver Island. Earthworms. These are big earthworm eaters here on the island. That seems to be their major food here on Beaver Island, is earthworms. They'll eat tadpoles, too. So I'm not thinking of anything else that I've seen them eat. I've seen a big garter snake grappling big toads before, so I've tried to eat them.
Minnows.
If they can get them, but they don't chase them down. They don't go in the water and chase them down. But if there's like a fish flopping up on the shoreline or something and they happen to be there, they chow down on that fish. They don't care. They like everything. They got the name garter snake. I know some people call them gardener snakes or garden snakes, and that's not correct. They are gartered, G-A-R-T-E-R, because presumably there are those longitudinal stripes on them like that to people that were first naming snakes looked like women's garters that used to hold up the, remember, those of you who are old enough to remember when the stockings would come to here and you'd have to put the garters down here on either side. That's how they got their names, because I thought that's what it looked like. So, which is kind of weird. I had to look that up. I wasn't sure either. But that's why they're garter, why they're called garter snakes. And like I said, you can't miss these if you spend any time outdoors on the island. You're going to see garter snakes. I'm going to grab the other one. Yeah, just 1 second. Oh, that bigger one. Stripe shows a little better on the back. But you guys that are all into snakes, tell me what you see there or don't see. Look at his face. Yeah.
There's a red stripe.
Actually, you're right. You see blue eyes. I be able to see that. Okay, this is a garter snake that's just about ready to shed. Remember I said that snakes don't have eyelids. So they have a covering over their eye that's solid. Protects their eye from getting hit by sticks or anything like that. And so when they shed, their skin, their outer skin loosens up before they lose their skin. And that's just kind of a modified skin over their eyes, so it loosens up too. So we're seeing a snake right now that will lose that blue that you're seeing there, because that'll just be shed with its skin when it goes out, and then you'll be able to see his eyes again. When snakes are in this condition, when the eyes are blue like that or they're getting ready to shed, they're often the most vicious. That's when they can't see well. So they're like anybody else. If something touches them or grabs them, they're going to strike out. Just like you might kick somebody, if they grabbed you. So this guy hasn't been that way. But sometimes you'll get, I don't know of many garter snakes that bite. I've probably handled over 500 garter snakes in my life. And I think I've been bit by maybe 3. So it doesn't happen very often.
Me too.
But yeah, well, it also depends on how you handle them. If you handle them, you're not as likely to get bit. But if you're going to get bit, they're usually in this kind of condition just before they shed. They kind of blue eyes like that. Yes, go time. Okay, so yeah. Thank you. I knew if I got into them, I was going to forget to say things. You're going to be my person to remind me to talk about things. Yes, they do. They give birth to live young. Again, they hold their eggs in their body, and then the eggs hatch essentially inside their body. But what you see come out of the female then will be live young, and they can produce a lot of young too, several dozen or so on a big female. A big female can be that big, and a big round snake. And she's old, and she's a good snake. She's been a good producer, so she's been around for a while. But they give birth to a lot of young. So I'm going to go on to one I don't have a snake of, and that is the eastern milk snake. They're just milk snakes here. They are relatively rare on the island now. It used to be they were more common. We've had things change here on the island, and I just got to see them the way I do now. They are here. They're often found around houses and buildings. I'll describe them a little bit first. They can get fairly big, about like that. They have beautiful rust-colored spots on their backs, and the spots are bordered with black, like somebody took a Sharpie and outlined the rust-colored spots. And then their body pattern's kind of a light gray. So it's a light gray background with rust and black spots on them. So they're really pretty snakes. And they usually have a Y. They're about back here. So you can imagine a Y on the back of my head like that. You can see that on milk snakes when you find them too. They are constrictors, which of course means that what they do is grab their prey and then wrap coils of their body around it. And they are mostly rodent eaters. So they're actually really nice snakes to have around your house because they'll take care of your mice. So, and they hang around buildings a lot because that's where the mice are. The mice are in the buildings, so you'll find them often around buildings. Sometimes old abandoned barns. They got the name milk snake because people used to think that they would get into the barns and milk the cows. Literally drink milk from the cows, which of course is just ridiculous. Who does that? But and we now know they don't. But the reason they kept being found in barns was because the barns had the rodents in them. They had the mice and the rats. Milk snakes lay eggs, so rather than giving birth to live young, they lay eggs, and they are a bit aggressive when you handle them. So if you corner a milk snake, it usually will coil up, it will rattle its tail against whatever it's in, so it sounds like a rattlesnake, and it will usually strike out at you. But again, it's not venomous, so it can't hurt you in any way other than breaking some skin. That's about all it can do. When you pick them up, if they're really agitated, they will often curl around your arm because they're constrictors, and that's something they naturally do too. Okay. Well, I'm starting to lose count. I'm just trying to get through the ball here a little bit of time. So they're, you might see them here on the island occasionally. They're not going to be like garter snakes where they're out in the road and you run over them because they're just not that common anymore. I will go back. There's one other snake, and I'm talking to you guys that'll maybe go on a trip tomorrow. There's one other snake that looks quite a bit like a garter snake too, about the size of a garter snake, called a ribbon snake. It is also not terribly common here on the island, but one place where you can find them is Miller's Marsh. And so ribbon snakes are striped snakes. They have those long stripes down their body, and they never have any patches or blotches on them or anything. They're just usually black with a light pale yellow or white 3 stripes, the same 3 stripes down their body, and they are really fast. Boy, when they move, they move. And those stripes help kind of camouflage into the grass that they move through. They have larger eyes and smaller heads than garter snakes do. So sometimes it takes somebody who knows their snakes pretty well to be able to tell a ribbon snake from a garter snake. But if you randomly go find a snake with 3 stripes on it down its back, which did I say was more common? Garters. So you always err on the side of the common and assume that is a garter snake that you have found. Ribbon snakes hang around marshes and wetland areas. They eat mostly things like frogs, tadpoles, things like that. And you're going to find them in wetter places usually than you find garter snakes. But one thing people tend to do with any kind of animal or plant is you always assume you've just found the rarest thing on the face of this earth. And that's just a wrong assumption. You should always assume that what you have just found is the most common thing on the face of this earth. That's the reason why if you find any snake with 3 stripes, unless you know your snakes well or you're with an expert, just assume it's a garter snake. But I hope tomorrow these guys will get a chance to see some ribbon snakes out at Miller's Marsh, because there are some out here. Then the last of the largest snakes that I have a specimen of will be everybody's favorite snake they like to hate, and that's the northern water snake.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will admit, they are my least favorite snake. However, they're very important. So before I have you pull the water snake, if you like the wolves, just stare over there. Or would you rather I do that? Okay, all right, okay. You don't need to pull that right now. You're always getting sick. Okay, yeah, but well, I do have a moderate-sized specimen of a northern water snake with me. My husband Ed got his hand bit, picking it up, and we got cornered, and he grabbed first, so he just got bit. But these are the ones you find all around the harbor, right? At Ferry Dock, out at the lighthouse, out of the Coast Guard station, anywhere there was water. They are called water snakes for a reason. They are the most aquatic of any of our snake species. They are the largest of any of our snake species, with the exception of the last snake I'll talk about. Right now I'm going to call them the largest that are commonly found. So they are big. Big female water snakes, like that. They can get huge. These younger snakes are usually very nicely modeled. I'm going to go ahead and let Hunter pull that out if he wants to. If it bites you, I apologize. But and so this is one of the nicer colored ones. He's not huge, so he shouldn't be too bad. The outer, the outer one. He wasn't too bad. So this is yeah, right. So this would be one with a good pattern on it and good color on it. See, it's got some markings on the belly, blotches and things like that. They are still pretty amazing snakes. They, of course, eat anything they can get hold of in the water, so they're big fish eaters. They eat a lot of fish. Now, some of you may have heard of the invasive round goby fish that we now have out in our lakes that have just taken over the bottom of many very rocky areas in all of Lake Michigan. Here on Beaver Island, when I see these guys eating, guess what fish I see them usually eating? Round gobies. So they're helping us control this invasive fish species here on Beaver Island. They also eat any other kind of fish though. So they'll eat, any minnows, shiners they can get hold of. And they actually hunt for their food in the water. They will go in the water and hunt for them for fish. They don't constrict. This guy may have his tail wrapped around me a little bit, but they don't really constrict, they just grab. They're incredibly good swimmers. Any of you have ever seen them in the water, you've seen what good swimmers they are. And they usually swim with their head above water, which unfortunately in other parts of the country means they get mistaken for water moccasins and they're killed. These are, I think, probably one of the most maligned snakes out there. I'm not fond of them, but there's no reason to kill them. It's hard to be fond of something that bites you and then immediately musks you as soon as you get hold of it. What have they been eating? Or did you say they eat mostly? Fish. So imagine musk smells like fish coming out. Yeah, so it's really smelly. He didn't do too bad. He was real bad. Yeah, he's been handled once. So they're very smelly. They bite, and when they bite you, they will grab and rip backwards. So you're going to bleed. You will bleed when they get you. So that's the reason why Hunter right there would be for bleeding off.
Do they take the flesh with them? Do they take flesh with them when they?
Yeah, enough to make you bleed, but it's usually just little holes. It's not, it doesn't like rip your whole arm. You are, yeah. So you usually have holes in wherever you've gotten bit or anything. Kind of like needles, because they have very sharp little teeth to hold their fish. Yeah, Joe.
Do they also eat frogs and baby
Yeah, I was
turtles?
getting to the rest of the thing. Yeah, they're kind of like garter snakes. They will eat just about anything. They will eat frogs, toads, birds, small mammals. They also don't care if they eat dead food. So they'll scavenge for food too. They'll eat dead fish up on the beach. They would eat a dead baby bird that had drowned in the water or something like that. So they are not picky about their food. They also give birth to live young. So these guys give birth to live young. And believe it or not, there was a record of over 100 baby young being born out of a large female water snake one time. So I don't think I've ever seen that many, but around. But and it's usually toward the end of summer. All of the snakes that give birth to live young usually have their young toward the end of the summer because they've been holding the eggs inside their body for most of the time, for the rest of the summer, like that. This is a particularly colorful one. He's got a pattern here on the back, as you can see. The young ones have a very similar pattern. The young are very brightly colored, like this, more this, and this is more than likely a male, because the males usually hold their color pattern. But the females tend to just get dull and kind of black, brown, grayish color, sort of. And again, it's usually the female. So usually when you find one about this size, but it's still holding its color pattern like that, it's probably going to be a male. So it's more likely that's a male. But the young are real brightly colored too. In fact, a lot of people who know milk snakes think that young water snakes are milk snakes. And they're not, because they're so brightly colored. So that covers what I call kind of the 7 species that everybody knows about here on Beaver Island. Sorry about it. But there is an 8th species now that we have to claim is here on the island, and that is the western fox snake. They are, I'll describe them a little bit, they are blotched on their backs with brown blotches. They have kind of a yellow, light beige, yellowish beige background color with dark blotches. And probably the most distinctive feature is they have an orange head. It's not like brilliant orange. It's kind of like what my hair color used to be before I turned red. Red. So it's like a redheaded color red. And they had not been reported from the island at all until 2017, when all of a sudden we started getting reports of these things around here. They're big snakes. They can get up to 5.5 feet long or so, although none of the ones from Beaver have been reported as being that big. And they are constrictors, so they will constrict their prey. They're mostly rodent and bird eaters. And they usually lay eggs, so they're egg layers. But the question is, why all of a sudden did we get these snakes showing up on the island? Those of you that are familiar with the various forms of communication here on Beaver Island, there'll be pictures of them on the forum or on the Facebook page, this and that, every now and then. I must admit that the McDonough's at the McDonough's Market have been great about letting me know about any they have found out about. And the only year we haven't had one reported since 2017 was just last year, and that was probably because of COVID and people weren't out and about as much as they were. We've already had one reported for this year. And all over the island, everywhere from Donegal Bay all the way down to Iron Ore Bay. So and we don't know where they're coming from. Turns out there are 2 kinds of fox snakes. There's what's the western fox snake, which is in Wisconsin and a little bit of the UP. And then there's the eastern fox snake, which is rare. In fact, it's considered a threatened species. It's in the very eastern part of Michigan. And what we're finding here are the western fox snakes here on the island. So this is just conjecture. We don't know if this is true, but we think that they may have grafted in from like the Garden Peninsula of Wisconsin or maybe the UP on like maybe old bits of trash and stuff that have moved across the lake. And because they can do this. They've been shown to do this type of thing before. And so they may have come into the island just accidentally. Nobody probably brought them here or anything like that. But because we're finding them now around the island, we think they're getting established here somewhere. The one thing we haven't found with these western fox snakes is they're pretty young yet. They've all been big adults. And if they were reproducing here on the island, we should be finding some young ones. But that's something we haven't been found. So they are a mystery. But I do have to say that there are 8 species of snake that's now here on the island with these big fox snakes. They are also one of those snakes you probably don't want to pick up. If you get one corner, it's going to rear back at you, strike at you, rattle its tail in the vegetation, and scare you to death. But again, they're not venomous. They're not venomous snakes at all. But they're pretty spectacular snakes. They really are. So I think it's kind of cool. We've got another snake on the island we didn't used to have. So that wraps up the Beaver Island snakes. Does anybody have any questions or comments they'd like to make? I think the snakes just went back to their car when we're going to get them to pod. Yeah.
When you were talking about how the rope snake so fast,
Ribbon snakes. Ribbon snakes are fast.
I was wondering if they were talking about
I can't tell you for ribbon snakes, but I did happen to read, just while I was kind of looking stuff up on ribbon snakes, it was somebody kind of like me that said, don't worry, no snake chases you. I know this is kind of off your topic. I'll answer your question in just a second. But some people think snakes chase them, right? Have you ever heard people talking about snakes chasing them? Snakes don't chase you. That's another thing. When you have a snake that's coming towards you, I'll show you what's happening. Imagine then well, you can't see the speaker. Imagine the snake's over here, and one of these chairs is its burrow, where it normally hides, or the board it normally hides under, and you're standing here. That snake's scared to death of you. But what's the problem? Yeah, where it wants to get to is there. So they will come at you in order to get to what they want to go under. So that's how those legends about snakes chasing people get started. That's because all they're trying to do is to get to wherever the safest place for them is. And you're in the way. If you see a snake coming toward you, take a step back. You'll probably run backwards if you're scared. But just run backwards. You're out the way of the burrow or the hole or the board or whatever. And it won't come towards you at all. It's headed for there. Now, to get back to your question about how fast ribbon snakes are, I don't know about ribbon snakes, but somebody caught another snake that is known as a very fast snake called a blue racer. They aren't here on Beaver Island, but they're very fast snakes. And that darn snake only clocked at 4 miles an hour. You can walk faster than that. Yeah. So probably the ribbon snake doesn't go that fast. The problem is it often goes very fast for a very short distance and disappears in some grass or disappears under something. So they're hard to catch for that reason, but I bet you can find some really different and I don't know, but I do know that they caught this thing called blue racer, which is a non-venomous snake. It's a non-venomous snake. It was about 4 miles an hour. Wasn't that fast? I know lizards are faster than that, but they have limits. So, okay, anybody else got any questions or comments? Okay,
Why do they sun themselves, the water snakes?
That's a very good question, and that was, again, something I meant to cover with water snakes. Picture that. Okay, first of all, how warm is Lake Michigan? Pretty cold, right? Those darn snakes, and I'll get back to your question here in a second, those snakes can go out there and hunt for fish in that cold water in Lake Michigan for hours at a time. They're even able to stay underwater for about an hour. Water snakes are. Yeah, just underwater hunt for fish in the water. So they're going to be cold, and so they're up sunning themselves because they're basking, they're warming up. All snakes are ectotherms, or what we sometimes call cold-blooded, which just means they can't create their own body heat. And since they can't create their own body heat, they have to rely on the sun or some other way to warm themselves up, and that's all they're doing. And that's the best place to catch water snakes is when they're out basking like that.
So they have no interest in hunting anything that's on the shore?
Not usually. Again, they'll pick up dead things, and I'm sure if they found something under a rock while they were hunting, they might go for it. But they're not.
They're not there to hunt.
No, they're out there to get warm.
They're out there to get warm.
I think they're like all good opportunistic animals. Oh, there's food there? Sure, I'll take that. But they're not really out there deliberately hunting. They do almost all their hunting in the water.
Right. Thank you.
Anything else? Yeah.
So I saw a striped snake yesterday, or actually a few of them, on that trail by Cable Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was surprised how fast they were.
It might have been a ribbon. It's a possibility it could be ribbons. There was again along the wet area.
Yeah, was that environment particular to either one of them?
The reason why I'm hesitating on me saying, oh yes, that's a ribbon, is because Cable Creek for the most part is a little shady for ribbons.
Yeah.
They normally prefer open marshes and fields. So, but a lot of garter snakes that are, if they're smaller, they're just striped. They don't have the extra pattern. So, I would go for the common.
Right,
And say it
exactly.
was probably a garter snake,
Yeah.
but it could have been a ribbon.
Yep.
I don't ever want to say, oh no, it wasn't a ribbon,
Right,
because I can't do that.
You know, my daughter is so scared to death to go in the water because she was sunning herself outside up by the beach and she sees these little pets popping up and she's going, I don't want to go out there.
No, they're not
Okay,
the
what
least
do you
bit
tell them?
interested.
What do you, they're not interested in
No,
that.
she's too big to eat. I mean, are you interested in walking over to that vehicle there and trying to chomp on it?
They're going to go away.
Yeah.
So if you're swimming,
No,
they're not
but
there. They're going to go away.
in the water, because they're at home in the water, they don't necessarily take off the way they do on land. You know, they might just kind of sit there a little bit, but they're not going to bother you. They're not going to bite you. They're not, you know, if you want to go up and just smack them out of the way and they'll leave. But they're just in their own habitat and they know they can move fast, so they don't tend to be very afraid of you in the water. And I think that scares a lot of people.
It does scare a lot of
Right,
people.
because they don't move.
Yeah.
They don't move much.
Are they multiplying on the island?
I think there are more of them, and I think the reason, again, this is just my idea. I think the reason they're more because of the round gobies. When the round gobies showed up, and you know, then they had more food and they've been producing more young, and I think they've been increasing. Yes. Jeff.
My question was related to, you said the northern water snakes were here. Are they also on the inland lakes?
Yes.
And in the
Oh,
swamps?
Yes. Oh yes, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know, just anywhere that's wet here on the island, you will find it. And garter snakes are the same way. You know, they're going to be anywhere on the lake, but you've got good habitat for them. I don't know. None of our snake species are like just around the area. You know, they'll be everywhere. You have good habitat.
What exactly is the name of that fish you said that is a threat that they're getting?
Round goby, G-O-B-Y.
Round goby.
Yeah, round goby. Yeah, they've come in and just taken over the bottom of Lake Michigan areas where there's a lot of rocks. So the water snakes are doing us a lot of good. Anything else? Okay, well, I thank you guys very much.
Very nice.
Thank you, everyone, for coming today. Next Wednesday, our topic will be about our Women's History exhibit that we'll be installing over the weekend.